And the Deputy Attorney General, you just saw, Todd Blanche, joins us to discuss this. Todd, great to see you tonight. Thanks for joining us. When did the administration decide to open up this new investigation of Abrego Garcia?
Well, I mean, look, the president and the Department of Justice since January 20th have been doing everything that we can to deport criminals who are here illegally. And that's what we did with this man. We deported him. We got him out of here. And a judge in Maryland and many members of Congress, we had a senator fly down to meet with him, questioned that decision and said, oh no, he's just a family man. And so we said, okay, we'll look into it. And when we started looking into it, and we have great law enforcement officers and prosecutors who started studying this man and investigating him, and what we found is that we were right. We were right. He is a criminal who should be deported. And at the end of the day, we have a responsibility to protect the American people and to keep our country safe. And so he was indicted, and he was indicted on very serious charges because of very serious conduct that we learned about during our investigation. And so he's returned, but he's not returned for any other reason than to face justice, period.
So this had nothing to do with Judge Boasberg's decision, which I thought was, over the top. Supreme Court saying, you got to try to facilitate the return. So you're saying tonight that the warning of possible contempt charges against administration officials, none of that had anything to do with the investigation?
No, I mean, first of all, the Supreme Court stayed any contempt proceedings by Judge Boasberg. That case has been stayed. In this case, we had a judge in Maryland tell us that, oh no, there's not any evidence that he's a member of MS-13. You had no right to deport him. And so what should we do as a Department of Justice when a judge is accusing us of doing something wrong? We have an obligation to everybody, including you, to investigate it. And that's exactly what we did. And so the reason why he was returned and the facilitation that brought him back here is not a judge. It's an arrest warrant issued by a grand jury from the Middle District of Tennessee, charging him with 2 counts of very serious charges involving 9 years of smuggling aliens all over this country, from Texas to Maryland and other states. That's why he's back, and that's why the government of El Salvador agreed to bring him back, because of a federal arrest warrant.
Of course, the left is going crazy about this, and they're kind of taking a victory lap. I don't know why they decided that this individual was who they wanted to tie their political futures to, but on one of your favorite commentators, Matthew Dowd, made some allegations that are kind of ricocheting across the Democrat Party against the DOJ. Watch.
The whole thing smells. Watching Pam Bondi's press conference, my takeaway from that is it's deplorable. She just makes these outlandish claims. It's not what American justice is supposed to be. It is basically, we're going to engineer this in such a way as we decide somebody we don't like, and we're going to do with them what we want. And when we're caught, we're going to bring the full force of the American government to try to find anything we possibly can to rationalize the mistakes we made to begin with.
Todd, is that accurate? Rationalizing the deportation of Abrego Garcia after the fact. That's what Dowd is alleging here.
I very much agree that it's deplorable, but what's deplorable is not only the reaction to this indictment, but the conduct as alleged in the indictment of this man. I don't think that Mr. Dowd has bothered to read the indictment or the publicly filed documents that lay out the proof against him. If anybody in this country thinks it's okay to do what he's alleged to have done, we have big problems. If anybody in this country thinks it's okay for a United States senator to use our taxpayer money to fly to El Salvador to have a meal with a man who, as is alleged, has spent 9 years moving illegal aliens all throughout this country, including children. I mean, read the indictment. This isn't Attorney General Bondi making things up. This is a grand jury indictment. That means, as we all know, that a grand jury heard evidence. And you can see from the indictment the source of that evidence. This is not a case of us doing something that's deplorable. The conduct is deplorable. It's very disappointing. It's very disappointing to have people on the left now complaining when they're the same ones that were accusing the Department of Justice and DHS of doing something so wrong and so horrible by deporting this man. And then when we actually investigate our conduct, we investigate who this person is, and we find out that not only is he somebody who needed to be deported because he's, as alleged, a member of MS-13, a terrorist organization, but he also spent 9 years, basically his full-time job, according to the indictment and the publicly filed documents, doing what he did. For people to react and all of a sudden accuse Attorney General Bondi of doing anything wrong here, it's actually extraordinarily disappointing to our law enforcement partners, the people that worked this case hard to find out whether, did we get it right? Is the left right? Is the senators that went down to visit him right? That this man should never have been deported. Let's look at this. Let's look at the evidence that we have to say that he's MS-13. Let's look at the evidence that we have that suggests that he's been committing very serious federal crimes. Laura,
what about Todd, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the photographs that Attorney General Bondi referenced of children, I found that particularly disturbing. And we have a huge problem with child sex trafficking in the United States, especially of foreign children being brought here and trafficked, abused in some way, exploited in other ways. What can you tell us about that specifically? And is that part of the underlying charges, or just those details, added in for explanation purposes?
So, yes. I mean, look, the folks that are complaining or suggesting there's anything wrong with this indictment should take the time to read it. And they should read the detention memo that was filed today as well. When it comes to the undocumented children, you're right, Laura, it's a big problem. It's so heartbreaking that there are young children coming into this country and then being shipped off or driven off by, as alleged, by people like this man, and then we don't know what happens to them. And you're right, there's sex trafficking, there's horrible things that happen to these people, and as alleged, and this is in the indictment and the publicly filed documents, this isn't Attorney General Bondi making things up. This isn't us trying to do something, out of bounds. It's publicly filed documents that some of the individuals that this man would traffic were young, undocumented children. And it's not, that's bad enough. But you're talking about doing it in vans and vehicles where there was no safety. It's really, really heartbreaking. And so, look, this man is innocent until proven guilty, and he will get his day in court, and he is back, and we'll see what happens.
Well, could we expect some of these co-conspirators who were quoted in the indictment to actually appear at trial? Maybe they have immunity or given immunity, or maybe they've already done their time, and appear at trial to tell what they know about him.
Look, I don't know what will happen at the trial, but certainly we have to prove that he is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's something we take very seriously, and rest assured that I expect that will happen, and I expect that when the public, when the American people see the evidence that we have against this man, and as far as what's going to happen at a trial, if there is one, that's certainly not something I'm going to try to opine on tonight. But this isn't a fluke of a case, Laura. This isn't something that we just made up, as the left is trying to suggest right now. This is a very carefully and heavily investigated case by a task force, the Vulcan task force, and we'll see who testifies at trial, but this is a strong case.
All right, Todd, we appreciate your joining us tonight. Thank you very much.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.